Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Connor Rogers, Matthew Berry, Jay Croucher. A lot has happened in the last 24 hours, so we did not wait until our normal Thursday slot. We got Kenneth Walker to the Chiefs. We got Travis Etienne to the Saints. Mike Evans, not in a Bucs uniform, seems absolutely crazy. Matthew, I'll start with you. What a whirlwind it was. This free agency felt a little faster and more furious than years past in the first 2 hours.
I feel like it always feels like that every single year. Although, one of the things I wrote about in my my NFL Combine rumors column, the very last note was talking to an agent there at the Combine who just said, listen, 20 new coordinators, 10 new head coaches, with a compressed time schedule. Again, like the Super Bowl just ended less than a month ago. And so he felt like this particular agent was just like, I don't know if it's going to be a big rush and people aren't really haven't had time to figure out scheme fit and do all the scouting. But in some cases, as we saw, like teams knew who they wanted, they went after and got them. So yes, it was a free agent frenzy, emphasis on the word frenzy.
Yeah, Jay, let's just, before we go move by move, I want to know what your thoughts, what was the most shocking? Was it Mike Evans finally not being with the Bucs, or was there just too much build up to that?
Yeah, the fact that it's with the 49ers and we get to see Mike Evans in Kyle Shanahan's offense with Brock Purdy, I think that's probably the most jarring move. But to me, under the radar, not necessarily surprising, but the biggest thing that I got out of yesterday is that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, most likely. It's the Atlanta Falcons team. Its roster is pretty loaded. And if Tua is good, like this team can win the division and be hosting a playoff game. And I think that guys like Tua and Kyler Murray, there's such a stench around their names because, they're not on the teams that drafted them in the first 5 picks anymore. They didn't live up to expectations. These guys are still good NFL quarterbacks, and they're going to have a chance to succeed. We'll see where Kyler lands, most likely Minnesota. But with Tua, just the fact that, Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the quarterback for Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts and co. That was, I guess it was somewhat expected, but for that just to actually happen, I think it's going to be pretty material for the season.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski loves himself some undersized left-handed quarterbacks, Matthew. You just can't get enough of them.
He really does, like he drafted Dylan Gabriel, now he's got Tua. Like if you're short and lefty, like you can play quarterback for Kevin Stefanski. Connor, start working on your other hand.
I was so close. So close. Just need to throw lefty. Oh, what a missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity. I was going to say my two most shocking, and we're going to get to these, but number one was just Malik Willis to the Dolphins. I mean, I know a lot of people had mocked that, obviously coach and general manager coming from Green Bay, but just their cap situation, right? From what I understand, and I'm not a capologist or anything like that, but from what I understand, I believe the Dolphins have over $150 million in one way, shape, way, or form to committed to the quarterback position over the next couple of years, because like they're taking like a $99 million cap hit by releasing Tua, and then they give like $67 million to Malik Willis, $45 million guaranteed. I think those are the numbers. So I mean, just like I thought they were just so capped out that they wouldn't be a part of the Malik Willis sweepstakes, and so that was shocking to me. That was my NFL Rumors Combine column. Had a pretty good run. I mean, go back and look at it. Like, I've nailed a lot of things, but one thing I did get wrong was I thought Malik Willis would go to Arizona. He's instead obviously going to Miami. That was the shocking thing. And then the other one that was kind of shocking to me, Connor, and this leads us into our show here, is Ken Walker going to the Chiefs. And the only reason I say they're shocking is that I just feel like Andy Reid has always been he's been a running back by committee guy. He's been he's the guy that made Sharkhandrick West a thing. He's like, he went into a season with Spencer Ware as his guy one year. Like, he's always been a guy that's kind of like, I'll make anyone a running back. And for them to pay the kind of money that they did on Ken Walker, $43 million for a 3-year deal, that was just surprising to me, just because I feel like we knew that Ken Walker was going to get paid. I don't know that we thought he was going to get paid that much, but I was just surprised that the Chiefs paid that much when you just sort of think about the ethos of that team, not necessarily team need, because I do actually think it's a great team need. Last 2 years, Chiefs have been one of the teams that's last. They've been last in explosive run rate and second in running back yards per carry. Like, it has been 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and I'm being generous on the 3 yards for the Chiefs over the last 2 years. And so, Like they needed somebody that, had big play potential and explosiveness and could run the ball and take pressure off Mahomes. And so they get that in K9.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to for the Chiefs with this move is that they probably, realize there's no world anymore where Jeremiah Love is falling to their 9th overall pick in the draft. So you weren't going to be able to necessarily draft a guy like that for this year. And that, the NFL is it clearly has been shifting to the run game for the upper echelon teams. This is going to be phase 2 of the Patrick Mahomes era now. Not that he's old, but getting older, so you have to retool what's around him. And Kenneth Walker, Jay, ends up being kind of the face of that, which, I respect the Chiefs kind of changing who they are and trying to kind of go with the way the rest of the league is.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things at work there where, one, this just speaks to just the fatigue of watching Kareem Hunt and that type of back and just grinding everything out and having to work so hard to get 4 yards a carry and stay ahead of the chains. And I think the other thing, too, is that Ken Walker, even though it feels like he's been around for a while at this point and he's coming off Super Bowl MVP and he's in the spotlight, like he's 25 years old. He's had under 1,000 carries in the NFL. The underlying stats have always loved him, even though if he is a little bit boom or bust, he skews more to boom to make it worthwhile and beneficial for his team the way that he plays. And I think also kind of what this speaks to is the fact that when the Chiefs offense was really flying, when it was the Mahomes, even going back to the Tyreek Hill days, you could kind of get away without investing at running back just because of the gravity that the passing game had. And I just don't think that the offense has really touched those heights really since Mahomes won his last MVP, which is 3-4 years ago at this point. So I think this just shows it's an acknowledgement that they do need to invest in the position. And for so long, it's been, running back is the position you shouldn't overpay. I think there's been a bit of a correction there where we've seen, the really smart analytical organizations like the Eagles and the Ravens, they've invested in Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. And I think that this just speaks to the fact that, you can't just get by with a no-name running back if your offense isn't all-world. And the Chiefs offense hasn't been all-world in a while now.
Yeah, you need somebody that can create explosive runs, miss tackles, and having that guy to lean on puts less stress on the offensive line because you're not constantly in a drop-back script where it's pretty predictable for the defense's front. And the fact is, once again, like we saw, Matthew, what Kenneth Walker did in the Super Bowl. When he's healthy, he's a one-man difference maker that can turn negative run plays into 10-plus yard runs.
24 career games where he's gotten at least 18 touches, and he's averaging over 108 yards from scrimmage in those games. Like, when he's healthy, he's right. The only knock on Ken Walker has been health, but played all 17 games this past year for the first time in his NFL career, stayed healthy, and then obviously became the Super Bowl MVP. Wish he'd caught 3 receptions in the Super Bowl, but otherwise it was a flawless performance. It hit him in the numbers, Jay. And then the fourth one was at his feet, Sam Darnold. He just, he should have hit the over 2.5 receptions. I'm just saying. But either way, the man gets paid, and I agree with you. I mean, I just think that when you think about how often the Chiefs are in the red zone, how often they run. I mean, how many times do we say, like, look, we don't think Kareem Hunt is very good at this stage, but he is getting work and he will fall into the end zone. Felt like every game, I don't have a stat for this, but just felt like every game Kareem Hunt would get you at least one rushing touchdown because just the Chiefs are in the red zone so often. And so assuming a healthy Mahomes, the fact that they've got Travis Kelce back as well, we'll get to that in a second, here just feels like, they're going to be in scoring position often. And when they are, while they will be pass heavy in the red zone because they're in the red zone so often, like Andy Reid's going to run. Like my expectation here is double-digit touchdowns for Ken Walker next year. I have him as a top 12 running back next year as well. Like, and there is a scenario that if Patrick Mahomes is healthy and this offense works the way we've seen it work in the past, and that Ken Walker stays healthy, like number one running back in fantasy is not outside the realm of possibility. Do I think Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs have better shots at it than he does? Yes. I wouldn't say he's the odds-on favorite, but like it's within the range of outcomes. A healthy Ken Walker with a healthy Patrick Mahomes and an Andy Reid offense, fantasy goodness can happen. He no longer has to worry about Zach Charbonnet, taking carries.
It was a good day, guys, for the top of this running back class in free agency as Travis Etienne agreed to a 4-year, $52 million deal with the Saints. Jay, the Saints offense right now, they've done a good job building up this offensive line. They also signed David Edwards, their only open spot on the offensive line at their left guard spot. They have the bookends at tackles. They have Chris Olave. Tyler Shuck played really well under Kellen Moore. Now they have their workhorse back, as Alvin Kamara obviously has declined over the years. Travis Etienne, coming off a career year, enters the New Orleans backfield.
Yeah, I feel like I jumped off the Saints bandwagon at precisely the wrong time during the Spencer Rattler era, and now instead have this Indianapolis Colts flag behind me, and we'll get to the Colts, but they are trending perhaps in the wrong direction. Saints definitely trending in the right direction, and Etienne, look, what's Travis Etienne? Is he the 14th, 15th best running back in the NFL? You typically don't want to pay those guys a ton, but where the rest of this team is at, the fact that Shuck showed what he did in the second half of the season, the fact they have a legit wide receiver one in Chris Olave, the fact that the defense is excellent and is probably the best defense in that division. This is a team that, kind of out of nowhere, because they were going from, Spencer Rattler starting games to now a legitimate chance at winning the division next year. And I think what makes Etienne a bit more defensible as a signing, Connor, is that this offensive line for New Orleans is in a pretty good spot at the moment.
Yeah, I think, number one, they've hit on both picks at tackle, right? Now they've added a guard, Matthew, that can help them kind of solidify this entire unit. There's no weak spot. We know that they can run the football schematically. It's easy to be very high on the Saints offense right now. Like the way they finished the season, the way they can throw the ball with the young quarterback, and now Etienne, who, healthy and reliable last year, is a huge addition and was, once again, like the Chiefs. I think the Saints realized Jeremiah Love was not making it to the 8th overall pick in the draft, and they went out and wisely addressed this in free agency.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I know the underlying metrics on Etienne aren't amazing, right? And but they needed to do something, right? Last year, no team in the NFL had fewer running back rushing yards than the New Orleans Saints. It just, love Alvin Kamara. I said this on my video that I did for social yesterday, but clearly at the end of his career. And Travis Etienne, you mentioned about sort of healthy and productive. I think people would be shocked to learn that since 2022, Travis Etienne has 2 missed games. Literally only 2 missed games since 2022. He's had over 1,300 yards from scrimmage in 3 of the past 4 years. So surprisingly durable. Feels like he's always questionable with a hamstring.
Right, banged
but
up. Yeah.
But he always ends up showing up. And so, I think if there's a concern here, it is that Kellen Moore offenses tend not to target the running back all that much. Now, I think Kellen Moore offenses are pretty good generally. I think they use the running back. You think about the Saquon Barkley year in Philadelphia when Kellen Moore was calling plays. You think about all the years in Dallas, the Chargers, whatever. But generally speaking, Kellen Moore, I think, calls a pretty good offense and a pretty good run game. He just don't use the running backs in the passing game all that much. But obviously, when you're getting a $52 million contract, you're going to be the guy. Kamara is still on the roster. We'll see what his role in this team will be. But I think Travis Etienne is kind of a mid-tier RB2. Again, lack of passing game involvement makes him more of an RB2 than an RB1 for me. But I think he's in that 14 to 18 range. I think he's super solid. And then the other part here, Connor, and you can talk about this because we were excited about him a year ago. And now it's time, at least for the moment, to get really excited about Bashal Tutin.
That's right. This elevates his role, a guy that can hit the big play, can factor into the passing game. And there's, obviously things can change with the rest of free agency, or more importantly, the draft, but there's just built-in reps for him. And the good news is it looked like they were trying to find ways to get him on the field as is. They just had talent in front of him. As we see Scott in the chat says, I'm buying as many shares of Tutin in Jacksonville this year in my drafts. I'm with you all the way. It's a player I really, really liked in his draft class. He's an excellent athlete. He's an explosive runner. And we know this offense, it can be tricky to figure out because they almost have so much talent. By the way, we'll see if Brian Thomas Jr. is on the move where that would change. But that is something that is a trickle effect of this that I'm excited about. All right, back to Mike Evans. It's funny, this is, a 3-year contract, but when you look at the structure of it, really just a 1-year, $16.3 million deal based on the guarantees, which, Jay, I think that's great business for the Niners for what Mike Evans is right now at this stage of his career. He's still a physical jump ball receiver. It's something, if Jawan Jennings is gone, that the Niners not only fill, they upgrade in this spot. And it feels like an insanely low risk when you're talking about 1 year of guaranteed money.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what this speaks to is that, the Niners offense, when Purdy was healthy, statistically was right there with the Rams offense as one of the best elite offenses in the NFL. But then you look at the difference between how those two teams played against Seattle towards the end of the season. I think that just brought into stark light the fact that you can't do it with smoke and mirrors all the time. Sometimes you just need to get a dude who can just beat his guy one-on-one. And Purdy just didn't have anyone who was creating separation or anyone who could win a jump ball against Seattle's defense, while Matthew Stafford had Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. And so with Mike Evans, who I get it, he's about to turn 33, he's coming off an injured season, but Mike Evans, his whole career is that he has been this metronome of consistency where every year it's been 75 receptions, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. And I think that he's such a good pairing with Purdy because, much like Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy will pull the trigger. He will take shots downfield. He is a gunslinger. He's not a game manager. He will throw the ball up for grabs. And Mike Evans, I think, should age pretty gracefully if he can fix these hamstring issues, because he's never been a guy who's been super dependent on his speed. He's 6'5". He wins at the catch point. So I think just as an added wrinkle, it's just a much needed dimension for San Francisco's offense and a great pairing with Ricky Pearsall, because now if Pearsall is healthy, the Niners have two legit wide receivers who can be elite at the position to go with Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield and then George Kittle once he gets back from his Achilles injury.
Yeah, see, I don't know that that's the case. I mean, to me, I think Ricky Pearsall's still a question mark. You know what I mean? You're like, if he's healthy, he's still in elite. I'm like, do we know Ricky Pearsall's good? We've seen flashes of it. We loved his college tape, but I don't think, I think there's a non-zero chance that Mike Evans is the number one wide receiver for one of the better offenses in the NFL here. And that even in a scenario where Ricky Pearsall becomes what we all thought he could be when he was drafted in the first round a couple years ago, I think there's still a scenario here where Mike Evans becomes this year's Devontae Adams. That was sort of an easy conclusion I came to yesterday when I was doing social videos. I think other people came to it as well, but not a ton of yardage, but a big red zone threat. Think about what Devontae Adams did last year with Matthew Stafford. They get in close, especially when you think about George Kittle coming off the Achilles, right? And we don't know when he's going to be back. Mike Evans immediately becomes the best red zone threat that Brock Purdy's going to have. And so you mentioned it, 6'5", Ved says, does Evans' move make Pearsall a better fantasy pick? Yeah, potentially, because I think he takes some attention away. But I don't know what look, Kendrick Bourne is now an Arizona Cardinal. We don't know if Juwan Jennings is going to be back with the team or not. So there's again, non-zero chance that Mike Evans is the best fantasy wide receiver, best fantasy pass catcher on the 49ers here. I have him in my initial ranks as kind of a low-end wide receiver too, in that, 20 to 24 range, right? 18 to 24 sort of there. We'll see how everything shakes out here. But again, I think he's going to be double-digit touchdowns, and I don't know, maybe he's 800, 900 yards. Not a huge yardage total here as well. I mean, again, remember last year, the first year, and he was injured for a while, but last year was the first year in his NFL career that didn't get 1,000 yards. So I think this is a great landing spot for Mike Evans. And to your point, Jay, a smart move by the Niners front office.
More receiver news right at the buzzer. The Colts knew if Alec Pierce got to test open free agency, that might have been it for Alec Pierce with the Colts. They get a 4-year, $116 million deal done. The trickle effect of this is to clear out some money. They send Michael Pittman to the Steelers for a late-round pick swap. Michael Pittman signs a 3-year, $59 million extension with the Steelers. So double Colts moves here. Matthew, obviously, Alec Pierce, from a fantasy angle, I find interesting to digest, because I think at times before any of this started, we were like, God, imagine Alec Pierce on the Patriots or the Bills, and you start naming all these different places. Good for Alec Pierce, friend of the show, gets a giant payday from the Colts. But how do we project him now? Pittman's out, some more targets, but still some questions at quarterback, even with Daniel Jones on the transition tag.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people saw that price tag and were like, wait, did Jay Croucher negotiate this? And the answer is yes. Yeah.
Nice job, Jay.
Yeah, it's well done. Yeah, for the shoe.
Yeah, Alex, my boy. He was lovely as well on our show. Very nice man, Alex Pierce. Very happy he's going to get paid. I think he's going to spend that money very responsibly. I don't
Might
have
not
any
spend it
issues
at
about
all.
Alec Pierce. Seems like a very high character type of operator. But look, I think we talked about Alec Pierce ad nauseum to the point where he's become a bit on the show. But look, I think the thing with Pierce is that, look, he went over 1,000 yards receiving this year, despite missing time, despite the fact that he only had one reception all season, over 50 yards. So he wasn't just fluking it with bombs. And to me, the most encouraging thing is that he runs a diversified route tree now. And the fact that, he had games where he earned 13 targets against the Steelers, 10 targets against the Chargers, the fact that he was able to do more over the middle, the fact also that he was able to have a massive game with Riley Leonard as his quarterback. The last time we saw Alec Pierce, he was going 4 for 132 and 2 touchdowns with Riley Leonard in a game that he got ejected from, which he shouldn't have been ejected from, as we've covered as well. But I think that Pierce, as well, with Pittman gone, the Colts are very much a forgotten team in the AFC landscape, but I'm old enough to remember the first 2 months of the season where they had the best offense in football. And I think that the bones of that offense are still mostly there. We'll see what Daniel Jones looks like off the Achilles, presuming that he is the starter as everyone expects him to be. But this is still a really good offensive line. It's still Pierce with Tyler Warren and Josh Downs alongside of him. Pittman is gone. I think that more affects Josh Downs than it'll affect Alec Pierce. So I think operates in a little bit of a different sphere. Still Jonathan Taylor at running back. And I think that Pierce, he's young enough at 25 where he can take another step. And Connor, like this guy, it feels like Alec Pierce is like a seventh rounder who came out of nowhere. Alec Pierce was drafted in the second round. This guy's got a lot of talent. I think that he really showed it last year.
Yeah, size, sub 4.4 wheels, like it's all there for Alec Pierce. And obviously he's been on the right trajectory where he's gotten so much better year after year. And part of that, it's been health. I think he's had 3 concussions throughout, maybe I'm not sure through the pros. I know he had 2 in a 9-month stretch. So injuries have played a part in sometimes derailing that. But when he's healthy, he could stretch the field. And Matthew, I think the big thing is with Michael Pittman gone, Pierce kind of finally evolves from that role of, okay, vertical guy. Can we get you running some shallow crossers where you have the ball in your hands after the catch, or some slants or some digs? Basically just open up the route tree where you operate more like a higher volume number 1-ish rather than this vertical stretch number 3, number 2 receiver. They're paying him to be a lot more than that now.
They are, but fantasy-wise, I don't know that he's going to be much more than that. Look, everything you say makes total sense, right? Listen, we like Alec Pierce. We like him on the show. He has become a complete wide receiver. I understand, for all the jokes about, wow, I can't believe Alec Pierce got that kind of money and did Jay Croucher negotiate the deal. The truth is the reporting out there is that Alec Pierce actually turned down more money to return to the Colts. I know my Commanders really wanted him. I know there were a lot of teams very interested in his services, and ultimately he got offered supposedly more money than what he ended up, but he gave a hometown discount to come back to Indianapolis, which is great. But here's the thing. So last year he has a breakout year, right? He's awesome. We love it. And so I'm going to take weeks 1 through 17. I think the week 18 game, I know he had a huge game here, but I think weeks 1 through 17 is probably a more accurate reflection. He has a breakout season last year. He was awesome. To your point, Jay, the Colts offense was unstoppable the first two months of the year. Alec Pierce was wide receiver 36 on a points per game basis. Now, okay, you take Michael Pittman and move him to Pittsburgh, so there's some more targets to go around. Okay, fine. But, this is still a guy who, despite some of the games you mentioned, Jay, still a guy who averaged under 6 targets a game, still only had an 18% target share. He's led the NFL in yards per reception each of the last 2 years, so he is a deep ball threat. I agree with you that his game has become much more than that, and certainly this contract says they expect him to be a number 1 wide receiver. But I think as we sit here, if we're here a year from now talking about the Colts, do we think he gets more targets than Tyler Warren? I don't. Do we think he gets more targets than Josh Downs? I think there's a chance that Downs gets more targets as well, just when you think about how Daniel Jones throws the ball. Now, what Pierce does is he opens up this entire offense. They still want to be run heavy with Jonathan Taylor. Look, he was wide receiver 36 on a points per game basis last year. I think that's about right. Like maybe move him up a little bit again, extra targets with no Pittman there. But to your point, Connor, probably helps Josh Downs more than it helps Alec Pierce. So I think he's in the 30 to 35 range, as a wide receiver. But I think this is a better move for the Colts NFL wise than it is suddenly, Alec Pierce is suddenly a top 20 wide receiver and an automatic starter. I think he's going to have some huge spike weeks next year. Love him in best ball, as we like to say. But I think consistent fantasy production, given how the Colts offense runs, I think it's going to be tough to see Pierce. Look, Pierce has that skill set, and maybe he does become the alpha, but it just feels like in Shane Steichen's offense, they like to spread it around. And that I think the person that leads the team in targets next year is Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I think on the Colts, I think I'm going to end up with Josh Downs in a lot of drafts because he's kind of the forgotten guy in this mix. One, Josh Downs is really good.
Yep.
And now two, he's going to take a lot of the usage that Michael Pittman got. And I think that there is enough space in this offense for 3 pass catchers to succeed in Warren, Downs, and Pierce. And also the scary thing with Pierce, as we mentioned, like, he is in a lot of collisions by the fact that he is downfield so often. He's in these jump ball situations. And while we hope obviously nothing happens to him, like if he has a concussion next year, it could be a long-term absence, as we saw with Trevarius Ward on the Colts, dealing with his own issues. So Josh Downs, I think there is a material. He's going to be the 3rd pass catcher drafted on the Colts, clearly. And I think there is a material chance that, he can be their number 1 guy.
Yeah, they will be a very interesting offense for us to talk through in August, of the distribution of everybody. And of course, the health of the quarterback, which is kind of the engine or sets the floor of what all those guys can do. Speaking of, it's always good when we get some fantasy relevant quarterback news in free agency. We mentioned this at the top. Malik Willis, Matthew, ends up going to...
Before we move to Malik Willis real quickly, I want to touch briefly on Michael Pittman,
of course, yeah.
Because I think he goes to Pittsburgh here, and it's weird because I like Alec Pierce more than Michael Pittman. Clearly the Colts like Alec Pierce more than Michael Pittman, but I think there's a pretty good chance that Michael Pittman has the better fantasy year next year than Alec Pierce. I think the Steelers are going to be more pass heavy under Mike McCarthy than they were under Arthur Smith calling the plays. I think, he's got less target competition. It's just him or DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf has never been a guy that was a massive volume earner, right? DK Metcalf's game had been about touchdowns and about, kind of the big plays. But Michael Pittman is somebody that's had at least 80 receptions for the last 5 years. He's never been a big touchdown threat, although last year Pittman gets 7 touchdowns. And so, even if the touchdowns regress and he's like, whatever, he's 4 or 5 or something like that, I just think he's going to be a solid, wide receiver 3, bordering on low end wide receiver 2 in PPR. I think he's in the, 24 to 30 range, as a wide receiver. I just, it's him and DK Metcalf, right? And we'll talk about the running backs in a second here, but I think, it's him and DK Metcalf and Freiermuth. But I think Pittman's going to get a big target share on what should be a much more pass-happy offense than we saw last year under Arthur Smith. Mike McCarthy has generally been he certainly was very pass-happy with the Cowboys, and with the Packers, he was a little bit more balanced. But and it obviously depends on whether Aaron Rodgers comes back or not.
Right.
But I think he's going to be, like a mid-tier wide receiver 3 that could border, like in the right situation, could wind up, wide receiver 22-ish, again, low end, wide receiver 24, low end, wide receiver 2. So he's in that range.
Malik Willis to the Dolphins, 3 years, $67.5 million, 45 of it is guaranteed. So Malik Willis ends up with a lower annual average than someone like Sam Darnold, these mid-tier quarterback contracts, but bigger guarantees. So, right out of the gate, this is familiarity for Malik Willis. He obviously comes from Green Bay, where the Dolphins' new head coach and new general manager do. But Matthew, I agree with you. I'd be fascinated to know how in Arizona was on this. Sometimes they have a reputation, cash flow-wise, of being a cheaper organization because they have an immense amount of talent. Now, Malik Willis will have Achane and Waddle. It's not like he's walking into nothing. But this is a very interesting scenario, is that Dolphins have shed some money this offseason, and with the Tua cap hit, could be kind of resetting. They don't reset under center. They bring in Malik Willis.
Yeah, this one was a weird one to me. As we talked about, I get it. General manager and head coach, both from Green Bay, where they're obviously very familiar with Malik Willis, and maybe that was also a factor in Malik Willis choosing to go to the Dolphins as well. He certainly gets paid. Look, we've talked about this before. We know the fantasy upside of him. 3 starts for Green Bay over the last 2 years, averaging over 23 fantasy points per game. The rushing is there. I think the concern here is that this is a guy that has 6 career starts. And for as excited we are about, full-time Malik Willis starting, he's got 6 career starts. And could this be Justin Fields 2.0? Like, I raised my hand. I was excited about Justin Fields fantasy-wise heading into the year, and that obviously did not work out when he had a full-time job, but he went to a dysfunctional organization with not a ton of talent around him. And so are the Dolphins as bad as the Jets in that scenario? No, but are they close? Kinda. This is a team that's had a lot of turnover here, and to your point, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, and not much else. You don't feel great about this offensive line. I don't think. I also think from a fantasy perspective. So for Malik Willis, I think he's probably in the QB 12 to 16 range. I think he's a mid-tier QB2 that's got low-end QB1 upside. Quarterback's really deep. I don't know if people have sort of looked at rankings yet or done any like best ball drafts, but like quarterback is super deep next year. So it's one of the reasons why. But given the small sample size and that there's definitely a scenario where this goes south, right? Given the lack of experience by Willis and the lack of talent, and it's a new offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, who, I don't know that he can take much, from last year when he was with McDaniel, up and down, seasons in Houston. The one thing I will say here is that I actually think, guys, that this hurts Achane and Waddle a little bit, right? That just because Malik Willis is the reason we love him in fantasy is he's willing to duck and run, but that's not great for Waddle, and it's certainly not great for Devon Achane, who, so much of his fantasy value came from the fact that he would get, 6-7 receptions a game. And so if Willis is not dumping off to Achane, like they'll still run the ball, they'll still use him, I think, in the passing game because they just don't have much else. But I'd say slight downtick in value for Achane, and I think Waddle is probably closer to a wide receiver 3 than wide receiver 2 again, given that I expect the Dolphins, at least with Willis, to be more run heavy than they have been in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, firstly, find it hilarious. We had a great NBA game last night on Peacock. Thunder, Nuggets, the 2 best players in the world going head-to-head, Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Jokic and SGA combined make about what Malik Willis and Tua Tagovailoa are going to be paid by the Miami Dolphins this year. It's pretty crazy that the Dolphins are in this situation, but
that's hard to do with NBA salaries.
It is hard to do. But I think that this is probably, for the Dolphins' purposes, if they weren't going to go the Kyler Murray route, then this was the best available route. The good thing with Malik Willis is that, unlike Tua, who is a pretty known commodity at this point, like there is real immense upside with Malik Willis. I mean, this year he had a 92 PFF grade. It's MVP level. Now, he only played 97 snaps, but there is something here where there are worlds where Malik Willis could be a star. He could be a star for the Dolphins. He could be a league winner in fantasy. So if you want to shoot for the stars, he is the type of guy that you go for. Now, it's going to be just on average, it's probably going to be a weaker scheme than what he had with Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. Bobby Slowick's stock probably goes up a little bit based on CJ Stroud's struggles after Slowick left. But at the same time, you would expect that the LaFleur infrastructure is going to have been kinder to Willis and what he'll get this year. But just the fact that he has Waddle and Achane, I think that gives a certain floor to the offense. Those guys are just so talented. They bring so much speed. This is a team that is going to be built around speed again. Offensive line is a concern. But yeah, Malik Willis now is one of the most compelling characters in the NFL going into the season, both real life and fantasy.
It's also going to be interesting to see, obviously, Hafley being a defensive mind, he usually be able to set some kind of floor on defense, but they have no players in their secondary right now. They traded Minkah Fitzpatrick, and the reason I say this is they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick. They're going to have to draft a corner, probably need to draft 2 corners. The pass rush, we'll see. They're okay in the middle of the field. Is there a world where year one, as good as Hafley is, they're in these scripts where they are down 60% of their games by, the Dolphins could be bad this year on defense, but that's great for Malik Willis because he'd be an elite, pass script heavy kind of quarterback because he'll be able to scramble more. The defenses won't be playing as tight. I know we're getting super far down the road here, but there's a road where the Dolphins aren't great, but Malik Willis, because of his skill set, also still holds some value. But
for sure.
I do think, Matthew, we were really excited about him before free agency, and this at least cools things a little bit where I don't know if he'll be a top 10 quarterback in drafts.
I'd have felt, yeah, exactly. Could he get there? For
Sure.
sure. The reason I have him ranked where I do, like as a mid-tier QB2, is because again, there's a wider range of outcomes. He easily has the skill set, again, to your point, because of both game script and the scrambling, and he does have some talent around him. And free agency isn't done yet, and I still keep the light on for Malik Washington to become a thing. And so there's still potential opportunity for him to be a top 5, top 7 quarterback. But there's also a scenario where, again, he's this year's Justin Fields, and just the bottom falls out, and like those 3 games were just sort of like the games that he made appearances were like either down big or like just, again, being in the Packers structure is different than being in the Dolphins structure. So it'd be really interesting to see sort of how it all plays out. But we're it's an interesting one. It's a very interesting one where we'll see how the Dolphins play out. The other one that's interesting to me is that, again, so Malik Willis goes to the Dolphins, but one of the things that I did not hear Tua Tagovailoa's name quite a bit when I was at the NFL Combine. I heard a lot about Malik Willis, a lot of Kyler Murray, a lot of some of the other quarterbacks as well. I think fantasy-wise, I would have preferred Malik Willis to go to Arizona where he could throw to, McBride and Harrison and Wilson. But he's not. He's in Miami, which means Tua winds up signing with the Atlanta Falcons, or is going to, when the official year opens on Wednesday. And so, look, I think there's no fantasy value for Tua in Atlanta. He doesn't run. I think they're still going to want to run the ball with Bijan Robinson. But the exciting thing here, Jay, is that Tua is good enough to get the ball to the guys we care about. Whether it's Drake London or Kyle Pitts, or honestly dumping off to Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson's already my number 1 overall. He's my 101. He's most people's 101, so it's not like he can go quote higher. But when you just think about how many times Tua would dump off to Devon Achane, and now he's got Bijan Robinson, Bijan Robinson could have 100 receptions next year, depending on how long Tua is the starter.
Yeah, I think the thing with Tua is that Tua Tagovailoa is a professional quarterback. He's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. He should have a starting job. I think we kind of know what he is at this point. I think he flashed an elite level in 2023. Since then, the wheels have come off as the league, I think, has figured him out a little bit. But look, Tua is very much like a lot of pocket quarterbacks who don't create that much outside of structure. I think he is a product of his environment. And this environment is excellent. It's a literal dome environment, but it's also with Bijan Robinson, a pretty good offensive line, Drake London, and then a really good offensive mind in Kevin Stefanski. So Tua, I think he is going to keep the train on the tracks. I don't think there's going to be a massive amount of surplus value that he's creating, particularly outside of structure. But I think just having the high floor of Tua and Penix combined when Penix comes back, I think makes you feel a lot better about drafting Drake London or Bijan Robinson. And it prevents the disaster scenarios where all of a sudden it's like, oh, week 13, Penix had a setback and it's like Brett Rippon time in Atlanta or whatever. I think that Tua just ensures against the downside scenarios for Atlanta. And look, this team is trying to, make the playoffs and win the division this year. It's a very competitive team. And I think that you feel pretty good about Bijan and Drake London, who are going to obviously go extremely high. Bijan Robinson will likely be the first pick. Drake London will be a top 10 wide receiver, clearly. So I think that you feel a lot better about those guys.
Over in Tennessee, Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll saying, let's get the band back together through free agency. And the headliner of that was the Titans.
Because it went so well. Because it went so well.
Well in New York for both sides. Wan'Dale Robinson coming off a career year, gets the payday, 4 years, $78 million, 38 of it guaranteed. Great for Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, Matthew, while there's jokes to be made about their free agency strategy, there are targets galore in the slot for Wan'Dale Robinson from Cam Ward when you look at the structure of this roster.
Yeah, look, he's we'll see if Calvin Ridley's still on the team come August, right? But, him and Alec Pierce and Shamari DK. And so you think about Brian Daboll, and I know a lot of people will sit here, the naysayers, the haters, Connor Rogers, will say, well, Wan'Dale Robinson, all of his production was because Malik Neighbors was hurt and it was a lot of junk time and blah, blah, blah. But Brian Daboll drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. He coached him for a number of years. And so I think Brian Daboll is sitting here going like, Wan'Dale Robinson is the kind of player I know what I can expect out of him. I know what the kind of offense I want to run. I know what Wan'Dale Robinson can do, and I think he's sort of a perfect fit, right? Breakout year for Wan'Dale Robinson last year, who for years we sort of thought, well, he's this slot guy. And then whether it's because of game script, because of no Malik Neighbors, because they just didn't have anyone else, Wan'Dale Robinson became a complete wide receiver last year. They were targeting him down the field. He was producing with Jameis. He was producing with Russ. He was producing with Jackson Dart. Like, whoever was out there, they were finding Wan'Dale Robinson. And so I think you're right. I mean, I think easily 120 targets for this guy. He had 140 last year for the Giants. And so it's weird to think about a slot guy, quote unquote, a slot guy as your number one wide receiver. But I think he's clearly the number one wide receiver on a team in the Titans that should be in game throwing script quite a bit next year, as well as they continue to rebuild in Tennessee. And so I think just him coming back together with Daboll and the familiarity with the offense and not a lot of target competition makes him kind of interesting. Now, again, it's the Titans. I don't think they're going to be in scoring position that often. I have him as in the 35 to 40 range among wide receivers is about where I think he's going to land, but slightly higher potential in PPR formats. I like Wan'Dale Robinson. We like Wan'Dale Robinson. It's just the question marks are about Cam Ward and the overall offense.
Yeah, Connor, interesting one for me. Rashid Shaheed. I still don't understand really what happened with him in Seattle, where, look, obviously they won the Super Bowl. He had some great moments, mainly on special teams.
Yes.
So the trade is a success, but reality is that his final 6 games as a Seahawk, the last 3 regular season games and the 3 playoff games, he had 5 receptions total. This was a guy in New Orleans who, before he got traded, was on pace to have around 80 receptions and 1,000 receiving yards. Do you think it was just the difficulty in acclimating to a Super Bowl contender mid-season? Is Rashid Shaheed more of a Percy Harvin type of player, or do you think there can be a lot more that can be unlocked with a full season?
I think it's what you led with, Jay, that they think through a full that, getting acclimated as the vertical guy is tough, right? Him and Darnold, the timing wasn't always there. So I still think they see a lot of promise in him as a vertical receiver in this offense once they have time to build that. But the beauty of it is you get 2 things that set the floor. You brought up the special teams plays, and we could factor in the gadgety plays with that. The second thing is Rashid Shaheed's presence is massive for a team that wants to run the ball. Even though they're going to have a different offensive coordinator, Seattle's offense is going to be built on running the ball. You need somebody on the field like him that hopefully can force some lighter boxes. So I think they value his presence. Anything they get as a receiver is a little bit of a bonus, but I am more optimistic, Matthew, about his box score production with Seattle next year than what the post-trade deadline showed.
Yeah, I think that's fair, although I will say that I think he's going to be a much better player for the Seahawks than he will be in fantasy, right? To your point, like, he's not going to play a full complement of snaps because they want him on special teams. You're still going to want, but what he does is he opens up things for Jackson Smith-Njigba, where he's so much more of a threat offensively at this stage of his career than Cooper Kupp is as well. I kind of like what I've seen out of A.J. Barner. They're getting a little bit of, but again, when you've got JSN as the number 1, but you've got Shaheed flying down the sideline, you've got to send somebody with him. And so hopefully the way they use Shaheed will open up the running game and also get some one-on-one situations for JSN. So it makes a lot of sense for the Seahawks NFL-wise. I don't know that Shaheed is somebody. I think Shaheed is going to be a guy that we're talking about on the waiver wire show, and not somebody that you're coming out of drafts with.
3 running back signings here that are all a little bit in the same bucket. Tyler Allgeier signs a 2-year deal with Arizona. Yeah. We'll go circle back to that in a second. Rico Dowdle signs a 2-year deal with the Steelers. Kenneth Gainwell signs a 2-year deal with the Bucs. So I think the consistent theme here, Matthew, with all of these is that there's entrenched starters in front of these guys, but does one have a better pathway to more touches than the other in this group of 3? You have, obviously, Allgeier with James Conner reworking his deal to stay in Arizona. I don't know what happened with Trey Benson there besides lack of health. You have Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle, of course. Jeez, that's a tough break for the Steelers. How is
Jalen Warren?
There we go, Jalen Warren. Too many names going through. And then, of course, Bucky Irving in front of Kenneth Gainwell as Rachaad White is still out in free agency as well. So is there a path for any of these guys, Matthew, where you see them kind of taking over or being more of a 1B than a number 2 running back?
Yeah, certainly with the first two, right? I mean, so you mentioned James Conner, but like James Conner, older running back, struggled to stay healthy throughout his career, and so is a scenario where Tyler Allgeier, who gets, you mentioned 2-year, $12.5 million deal almost, that's pretty solid money,
right?
You know what I mean, like that's not nothing, right? It's not Ken Walker or Travis Etienne money, but it's not nothing. And so, Allgeier, who, had the 8 rushing touchdowns, who last year, I think, had, 500 yards, is somebody who's been, very, very solid. And so with a larger work role, I mean, we've talked about this. Tyler Allgeier is good. Tyler Allgeier's biggest issue is that he wound up on a team with Bijan Robinson.
That's right.
It's like, he's a good running back. He's just not one of the 3 best running backs in the NFL. And that's a tough spot. And yet even with Bijan Robinson on his team, Allgeier still managed to carve out a significant role for himself. And so he goes and gets some money from what we think will be a pretty good Cardinals offense. So is there a scenario where Allgeier could become the guy? Sure. James Conner gets hurt, or just he becomes, again, it's a new regime. It's a new coaching staff, right? It's Mike LaFleur. He's got no loyalty to James Conner, all due respect. It's a new coaching staff. And so they went out and get Allgeier. So I certainly think there's a scenario there. And then the other one that's obvious in terms of who could take over, it's Rico Dowdle reuniting with Mike McCarthy, who had him in Dallas when he had 1,000 yards for the Cowboys. And so, look, free Jaylen Warren. You know what I mean? I don't know what we have to do to ever get Jaylen Warren to get a full-time gig. Like, America loves Jaylen Warren. I love Jaylen Warren. Just everyone except whoever's coaching the Steelers for whatever reason. We just can never seem to get him a full-time role. And the signing of Rico Dowdle seems like we're going to have to wait even longer, because now Gainwell moves on. We'll talk about him in a second, but feels like you have both guys that are sort of complete running backs, right? Warren was the pass catching back when Najee Harris was there. Najee leaves, they bring in Gainwell, and so now all of a sudden Jaylen Warren's like the bruiser.
Yeah.
Rico Dowdle was sort of the bruiser, but then in Carolina we see Rico Dowdle can be used in the passing game. So they're both complete running backs here. I think ultimately what this means is that the Steelers hate Caleb Johnson.
I was going to say.
That's what this means.
This happened so fast.
Yeah. The Steelers were like, are we losing Kenneth Gainwell? Well, we spent I think what was Caleb Johnson, a third round pick?
An early third, I thought.
Early third. And they're like, no, thank you. Rico's out there? Okay, go get Uncle Rico. I just, look, I'm going to, my suspicion is that the way the ADP will fall is that Rico Dowdle will be higher than Jaylen Warren, because everyone will make the Dowdle McCarthy connection. But I will still say that Jaylen Warren will be the better draft day value, just as we sit here today. I just think he's the better running back. And I like Rico Dowdle. I know he had a couple of 200-yard games, and he was awesome.
Yeah.
But I think Jaylen Warren's a special running back. I don't know why he can't get just a full-time gig to himself. But by the way, same thing, similar money, 2-year deal, $12.5 million for Rico Dowdle as well, right? So
yeah,
kind of similar numbers from what I understand, from what I remember.
Yeah, all 3 of these contracts were in the same kind of bucket as guys that'll operate as number 2s going into camp, but they all have avenues in front of them for a bigger workload. By the way, a little mini note for the Bucs. Cade Otton, who we talked about through how many waiver wire weeks, Jay, for tight ends? It's basic with Cade Otton. When the Bucs go through some injuries at pass catcher, now Mike Evans won't be there. He is a viable streaming tight end with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, kind of the Kenyon Drake of tight ends. Kenyon Drake of waiver wire show goes past. But Cade Otton, look, I mean, we very much know what he is. I think that the hope for Cade Otton would be that this Bucs offense is better than it showed in the second half. And this Bucs team, as kind of catastrophic as the season ended, for the first half of the season, they were really humming on offense, and they had a lot of injuries on the offensive line. I will forever remain convinced that Baker Mayfield was just not healthy after the injuries that he dealt with mid-season in the second half of the year. So you'd hope that with Baker being healthier, with the offensive line being healthier, that this can get back to being the elite offense that it was 2 seasons ago. And just Mike Evans, the good thing for Cade Otton is Mike Evans takes a lot of touchdowns. And those touchdowns are now more up for grabs. And look, Emeka Egbuka, it's going to be a huge year for him because he had basically the two most extremes to halves of a season that you can imagine, where he was a top 10 wide receiver for the first half and then unplayable for the second half. And if Ibuka is kind of halfway in between that, then there's going to be a lot of opportunity for other guys in the offense. And so K-Dotton, again, not someone that you ever feel super enthused about, but it's probably someone that you can start and hope that you get 8 to 9 points out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a mid-tier tight end too. But your point about just sort of with Mike Evans leaving, look, another year healthier for Chris Godwin, but the emergence of Ibuka, Jalen McMillan, I think, is suddenly on the sleeper radar, as is Tez Johnson. We saw flashes from both guys over McMillan 2 years ago, Tez last year as well. But that was one of the reasons why I said in my column, my rumors column, like, Mike Evans isn't coming back. I know there were some agents out there. There were some reporters out there like, oh no, the Bucs are trying to re-sign him, and I think they were trying to do some favors for Tampa Bay there or something, because like it wasn't going to happen, especially knowing what Evans was going to command on the open market. But as long as we're talking Tampa Bay, we sort of glossed over Kenneth Gainwell. The one thing I just want to say here is, like, look, Bucky Irving is entrenched as the starter. Like, where there's a scenario where Rico Dowdle could be the number one running back for the Steelers over Jalen Warren, he becomes more of a third down guy, Warren does, or that Allgeier, the healthier, younger running back, becomes the lead of what is a committee in Arizona. Look, Kenneth Gainwell is always going to be the number 2 to Bucky Irving. But when you think about Rachaad White and Sean Tucker moving on, I think that Gainwell, from a touch perspective, could have both the Rachaad White and Sean Tucker role. He's not going to get the goal line work that Tucker did. That's going to go to Bucky Irving. So I think this actually helps Irving a little bit, because I think, less of a potential vulture here. But it does hurt Irving's pass catching ability, because I think Gainwell is clearly 2 years, $14 million. It is going to be Bucky Irving on first and second down and Kenneth Gainwell on third down, which is sort of crazy to think about, Connor, when you thought about Bucky Irving's profile coming out of college.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to construct a backfield. But the ironic thing is, the Steelers just did this with Warren and Gainwell last year. So the Bucs are kind of like, hey, we like the mold of that. Some teams like to have the Thunder and Lightning. Some teams have heavier backfields. I guess some teams now can go more undersized backs that give you a little juice in the pass game. More tight end news, and this kind of rounds things out. The boring one is Travis Kelce returning to the Chiefs. I don't think anyone ever thought Travis Kelce was playing a down of football anywhere else throughout this offseason. The interesting one, Matthew, is Isaiah Likely getting a pretty big contract from the Giants. We know they have Theo Johnson to play on the line of scrimmage, but that's probably good news to keep Isaiah Likely off of it. It feels like he, not from a volume perspective, but he almost takes the alignment role that Wan'Dale Robinson had in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about after Malik Neighbors, they just don't have much else. They lose Wan'Dale Robinson, so I like Isaiah Likely reuniting with Coach Harbaugh. But yeah, more of a move tight end than a blocking guy. Theo Johnson's a good blocker, so could they go to more 2 tight end sets that we saw a lot in Baltimore as well? As somebody that has both Isaiah Likely and Theo Johnson in a tight end premium dynasty league, I was very, very depressed about this news. I was hoping that Travis Kelce was going to retire, and then Isaiah Likely would go to be the new Travis Kelce in Kansas City, and none of those things happened. So, I mean, no one's shocked about Kelce coming back to Kansas City. He was coming back. To me, the surprising thing was that he's coming back. I sort of thought last year was going to be Travis's last year. The NFL's more fun with Travis Kelce, so we're excited that he's back. I think he's still a mid-tier tight end one, assuming Mahomes is back. He's still going to be a red zone threat and a part of that offense. Back to Likely and Theo Johnson, I think you'll see both guys out there. I prefer Likely to Johnson, but I think, unfortunately, they're going to sort of eat each other out, as it were. And that's awkward. I hope somebody does that.
Oh, no.
I was going to let you move through it.
No.
I was going to let you move through it.
I feel like that's prepared material as well.
There's production away. They're going to,
we were like 3 minutes from the show being over. Just we couldn't make it.
Yeah.
You can get a graphic there with AI.
No.
That's going to be
I want out.
That's going to be awkward.
I want to go home.
Well,
I'm already home.
I would just like to take a moment here to thank NBC for all the time. Had a great run. Appreciate everyone.
Football Night in America was fun.
Yeah,
Life experience.
It was great. Maria Taylor, I'll miss you. Appreciate everyone. I apologize. I have no further comment at this time.
We get in there.
I was hacked. I'm trying to think of all the other excuses.
Rashawn Gary.
I was on Ambien. Yeah. It's
That
AI.
might actually work. That excuse.
Yeah, it was. That's AI. That's AI. It clearly wasn't me. Anyway, my expectation here is that Isaiah Likely and Theo Johnson are going to eat into each other's target share.
It's over.
Because of because they play the same position. but I prefer Likely to Theo Johnson. I mean, both red zone targets. But to your point, I do think they probably view Likely, again, new head coach, that is familiar with Likely from their days in Baltimore together. That Likely becomes kind of that big slot, for lack of a better way to phrase it.
Big slot indeed.
Big slot. Anyway, God bless everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you to Lawrence Jackson for taking over for me next week. Thank you, Stephen and Damien, our producers.
For everything.
Yeah, for everything. I'll miss everyone. When you speak of me, speak kindly. That's all I ask. Because this is over.
Do not speak of my demise.
No. But you can. I get it. Yeah. What are you going to do? I had a good run.
Well, we'll see. We're supposed to be back Thursday. So...
we'll see if I am. No, The show is back Thursday. I want to be clear.
Yes.
The show is back Thursday. Whether I am or not, we'll see. Yeah, that was bad. In fairness to me, it's my first time on TV.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. Anyway, do we have anything else, Connor?
No, that's the entire rundown. You literally blew it on the last player. The last player of all the players we went through. You dropped the ball before crossing the goal line. It's actually unbelievable.
Yeah. No, I'm Adonai Mitchell is what I am. Yeah.
Adonai Mitchell, Deshaun Jackson, Malachi Corley.
Yeah.
The list of legends.
Malachi Corley, always underrated in that discussion.
A very underrated one.
His was just as bad.
Yeah, never heard from again.
Yeah. Never. All right. Well, listen, that music means it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. That's especially true for me. So the show is back on Thursday. I'm not sure if I will be, but until then, follow all of us on social media for reaction to free agency. Rotoworld.com for all your player news as well. For Jay and Connor, I'm potentially Matthew Berry for the last time. Peace out.